The morning sun had not yet risen over the city when Elena Vasquez woke up in her small apartment. She lived in a tiny place with one bedroom, a small kitchen, and a bathroom that always had problems with the water. The walls were thin, and she could hear her neighbors talking, watching television, and sometimes fighting. But Elena did not complain. This was her home, and she was grateful to have a roof over her head. She was 32 years old, with dark brown hair that she always tied back in a neat bun for work. Her eyes were the color of coffee, and they held a sadness that she tried to hide from the world. Every morning she looked at herself in the cracked mirror above her sink and told herself that today would be a good day. Sometimes she believed it. Most times she did not. Elena worked at the Grandview Hotel, one of the most expensive and famous hotels in the entire city. It was the kind of place where movie stars stayed when they came to town. Business leaders held important meetings in its private rooms. Wealthy families celebrated weddings and anniversaries in its grand ballrooms. The hotel had crystal chandeliers that sparkled like diamonds, marble floors that shone like mirrors, and furniture that cost more than Elena would earn in 10 years. But Elena was not a guest at the Grandview. She was a waitress. She worked in the events department, which meant she served food and drinks at parties, galas, and special occasions. She had been doing this job for 3 years now, and she had become very good at it. Being a good waitress at the Grandview meant more than just carrying trays and pouring drinks. It meant being invisible. The wealthy guests who attended these events did not want to see the people who served them. They wanted their champagne glasses to be full, their plates to appear and disappear, and their needs to be met without ever having to ask. Elena had learned to move like a ghost, silent and unseen. She knew how to walk without making a sound. She knew how to approach a table at exactly the right moment. She knew how to smile politely when guests were rude to her, which happened more often than she liked to admit. Some guests looked right through her as if she was not even there. Others spoke to her like she was stupid or slow. A few made comments about her appearance that made her feel small and ashamed, but Elena never complained. She needed this job. The money was not great, but it was steady. She got tips sometimes, and the hotel gave her meals during her shifts. In a city where rent was high and life was expensive, these small things mattered. On this particular Tuesday morning, Elena took the subway to work. The train was crowded with people going to their jobs, students heading to school, and tourists looking confused at the map. Elena found a small space to stand near the door. She held onto the metal pole and closed her eyes for a moment, letting the movement of the train rock her gently. She thought about her life and how different it was from what she had imagined when she was young. When she was a little girl, she had big dreams. She had believed that she would do something special with her life, something that would make her mother proud. But dreams were for children, she told herself. Adults had to deal with reality. The train stopped at her station, and Elena walked the 4 blocks to the Grandview Hotel. She entered through the staff entrance at the back of the building, a plain door that led to a plain hallway. This part of the hotel looked nothing like the beautiful spaces the guests saw. The walls were painted a boring gray color. The floors were simple, concrete. Pipes ran along the ceiling, and the lighting was harsh and bright. Elena went to the staff locker room and changed into her uniform. Black pants, white shirt, black vest. She checked her appearance in the mirror, making sure every button was done, every crease was smooth. The hotel was very strict about how staff members looked. A single stain or wrinkle could mean trouble. Her supervisor, a thin man named Mr. Patterson, was waiting in the events office when Elena arrived. He was looking at a clipboard and frowning, which was his normal expression. Mr. Patterson rarely smiled. He ran the event staff with strict rules and high expectations. Elena had never seen him say a kind word to anyone. "Vasquez," he said without looking up. "You are on the VIP section today. The Morrison birthday party. 100 guests. Do not mess this up." "Yes, sir," Elena replied. The Morrison family was one of the richest families in the city. Mr. Richard Morrison had made his money in real estate. He owned buildings all over the country, and his birthday party was expected to be one of the biggest events of the month. Elena had served at Morrison events before. The family was demanding but not cruel. As long as she did her job well, there would be no problems. The morning was spent preparing the ballroom. Elena and the other staff members set up tables, arranged flowers, polished silverware, and folded napkins into fancy shapes. Every detail had to be perfect. The Grandview had a reputation to maintain, and Mr. Patterson reminded them of this fact every few minutes. "The flowers are crooked on table 7, he said. "Fix it. There is a spot on that glass. Replace it. Why are you standing there doing nothing? There is work to be done." Elena worked quietly and efficiently. She had learned long ago that the best way to survive at this job was to keep her head down and her mouth shut. She did not make friends with the other staff members. She did not join them for drinks after work. She kept to herself because it was easier that way. By the time the guests started arriving, the ballroom looked like something from a fairy tale. The tables were covered in white cloths that seemed to glow in the candlelight. The crystal glasses sparkled. The silver cutlery shone. Flowers in shades of pink and white filled the room with a sweet smell. The guests arrived in expensive cars. The women wore dresses that cost thousands of dollars and jewelry that costs even more. The men wore suits that were perfectly fitted to their bodies. They laughed and talked and greeted each other like old friends, because most of them were old friends. This was a world where everyone knew everyone else, where families had known each other for generations. Alina stood at her station and watched them come in. She held a tray of champagne glasses, ready to offer drinks to anyone who wanted one. The guests took the glasses without looking at her. They did not say thank you. They did not even notice she was there. This was her life. This was her reality. She was invisible, and she had accepted it. But deep inside her heart, in a place she rarely allowed herself to visit, there was a memory of music, a memory of black and white keys beneath her fingers, a memory of a time when she was not invisible. When people looked at her and saw something special, she pushed that memory away, as she always did. That was the past. This was the present, and the present required her to serve champagne to people who would never know her name. The party continued, and Alina moved through the room like a shadow, unseen and unheard, carrying her secret inside her heart. Alina had not always been a waitress. There was a time, many years ago, when her life was filled with music and hope and the promise of something wonderful. She grew up in a small apartment in the Bronx, a neighborhood in New York City where families worked hard just to get by. Her mother, Maria Vasquez, was a cleaning woman. She woke up before sunrise every day and took buses across the city to clean the homes of wealthy people. She scrubbed their floors, washed their dishes, and made their beds. Then she came home exhausted, her hands rough and red from all the chemicals she used. Maria was a small woman with a big heart. She had come to America from Mexico when she was just 19 years old, full of hope for a better life. She had worked every day since then, never complaining, always believing that hard work would lead to good things. When Alina was born, Maria made a promise to herself. Her daughter would have a better life. Her daughter would have opportunities that Maria never had. Alina was 6 years old when everything changed. It was a hot summer day, and she was walking home from school with her mother. They passed by an old building where people were throwing away furniture. There, sitting on the sidewalk like a forgotten treasure, was an upright piano. The piano was old and scratched. Some of the white keys had turned yellow with age. But to little Alina, it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. She stopped walking and stared at it with wide eyes. "Mama," she said, pulling on her mother's hand. "Look at that." Maria looked at the piano, then at her daughter's face. She saw something in Elena's eyes, a spark of wonder that she had never seen before. Without thinking too much about it, Maria walked up to the men who were throwing things away. "Is this free?" she asked, pointing at the piano. The men laughed. "Lady, you can have it if you can move it. We were just going to leave it here for the garbage truck." It took Maria 3 hours to find people who would help her move the piano. She paid 2 men from the neighborhood $20 each to carry it up the 4 flights of stairs to their apartment. The piano barely fit through the door, and they had to rearrange all their furniture to make room for it. But when it was finally in place, when Elena sat down on the old bench and touched the keys for the first time, Maria knew she had done the right thing. Elena pressed one key, then another. The sounds that came out were slightly out of tune, but they were magical to her ears. She spent the rest of that day sitting at the piano, pressing keys and listening to the notes. That night, Maria made a decision. She would find a way to give her daughter piano lessons. She did not know how she would pay for them. She did not know where she would find the time. But she would find a way, because that was what mothers did. A few weeks later, Maria heard about an old man named Mr. Kowalski who lived in their building. He had been a piano teacher in Poland before he came to America. Now he was retired, living alone, and sad because his wife had died the year before. Maria went to his apartment with Alina and a plate of homemade tamales. "Please," Maria said to him, "my daughter loves the piano. I cannot pay much, but I can cook for you. I can clean your apartment. Please teach her." Mr. Kowalski looked at Alina. He saw a small girl with big brown eyes and messy hair. He asked her to play something on the little keyboard he had in his apartment. Alina played the simple melody she had taught herself. Just a few notes repeated over and over. But Mr. Kowalski saw something in how she played. Her small fingers moved with a natural grace. Her body swayed slightly with the rhythm. She was not just pressing keys. She was making music. "I will teach her," he said to Maria. "No money. Just send her to me twice a week." And so Elena's musical education began. Twice a week, she went to Mr. Kowalski's apartment after school. He taught her how to read music, how to position her hands, how to feel the rhythm in her body. He was a strict teacher but also a kind one. When Alina made mistakes, he corrected her gently. When she played well, his old face would light up with a smile. Alina practiced every day on the old piano in their apartment. Her mother worked extra hours to pay for books and sheet music. Sometimes there was not enough money for food, but there was always money for Elena's music. Maria believed in her daughter with a faith that never wavered. By the time Elena was 12, she was winning competitions. She played at school concerts, at church events, at community gatherings. People started to notice her. They said she had a gift, a talent that could not be taught. The music seemed to flow through her like water, natural and pure. At 14, she was invited to play at a special concert at Lincoln Center. It was a showcase for young musicians from all over the city. Elena was terrified. She had never played on such a big stage. in front of so many people. But when she sat down at the grand piano and placed her fingers on the keys, all her fear disappeared. She played Chopin, and the audience fell silent. When she finished, they rose to their feet and applauded for what seemed like forever. After the concert, a woman in an expensive suit approached Maria and Alina. She was a professor from Juilliard, one of the best music schools in the entire world. "Your daughter is extraordinary," she said to Maria. "When she is old enough, she must come to Juilliard. We will give her a full scholarship. She has a future that most musicians only dream of." Maria cried that night. She held Alina in her arms and told her that all the hard work had been worth it. Her daughter was going to be somebody. Her daughter was going to have the life that Maria had always dreamed of. Alina was 16 when she officially received her acceptance letter to Juilliard with a full scholarship. It was the happiest day of her life. She would study with the best teachers in the world. She would perform on the greatest stages. She would become a concert pianist, traveling to cities she had only seen in pictures, playing music for thousands of people. Mr. Kowalski came to their apartment that evening. He was very old now, walking with a cane, but his eyes were bright with pride. He had watched Alina grow from a curious child into a remarkable young musician. He gave her a gift, an old silver bracelet that had belonged to his wife. "She would have wanted you to have this," he said. "You have brought music back into my life. Now go and share it with the world." Alina wore that bracelet every day. She wore it when she moved into the dormitory at Juilliard. She wore it when she attended her first classes, surrounded by talented musicians from all over the world. She wore it when she practiced for hours in the practice rooms, her fingers dancing over the keys. The professors at Juilliard said she was special. They called her once in a generation, a phrase she did not fully understand but knew was a compliment. They said she had something that could not be taught, an emotional depth that touched everyone who heard her play. Alina was 18 years old, and her future seemed brighter than the sun. She was going to be famous. She was going to make her mother proud. She was going to prove that a girl from the Bronx, the daughter of a cleaning woman, could become something extraordinary. She had no idea that her world was about to fall apart. It was a cold November evening when Alina received the phone call that changed everything. She was in one of the practice rooms at Juilliard, working on a difficult piece by Rachmaninoff. Her fingers were tired, but she kept playing because she wanted to be perfect. She always wanted to be perfect. Her phone rang. She almost did not answer it because she did not like to be interrupted during practice. But something made her pick it up. It was her mother's number. Alina, her mother's voice sounded strange, weak, scared. "I need you to come home." Alina felt her heart stop. "Mama, what is wrong? Are you okay?" There was a long pause. Then her mother spoke again. "I went to the doctor today. They found something. They want to do more tests." Alina left Juilliard that same night. She took the subway to the Bronx, running from the station to her mother's apartment. When she got there, Maria was sitting at the kitchen table, looking smaller than Alina had ever seen her. There were papers spread out in front of her, medical forms and appointment cards. "They found a spot on my pancreas," Maria said quietly. "They do not know what it is yet. It could be nothing. It could be something." It was something. A week later, after many tests and scans and doctor visits, they had an answer: stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors said these words gently, but Alina could hear what they were really saying. Her mother was dying. "How long?" Alina asked the doctor, her voice breaking. The doctor looked at her with kind but honest eyes. "With treatment, maybe a year, maybe 18 months. But this type of cancer is very aggressive." "I am sorry." Alina felt the world collapse around her. Her mother, her strong, hard-working, loving mother, was going to die. The woman who had sacrificed everything so that Alina could follow her dreams was going to die, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. Maria refused to let Alina give up her scholarship. "You must stay at Juilliard," she said firmly. "I did not work all these years for you to throw away your future." But Alina could not focus on music anymore. How could she sit in a practice room playing Chopin when her mother was sick at home? How could she think about concerts and competitions when the most important person in her life was fighting for her life? She tried to do both for a few weeks. She attended classes during the day and took the subway to the Bronx every evening to be with her mother. She barely slept. She forgot to eat. Her playing suffered because her mind was always somewhere else. Then her mother got worse. The treatments made Maria weak and sick. She could not take care of herself anymore. She could not cook. She could not clean. She could barely walk to the bathroom without help. Alina knew what she had to do. 3 months into her second year at Juilliard, Alina walked into the administration office and withdrew from the school. The professors begged her to stay. They offered to give her time off, to let her catch up later. But Alina shook her head. "My mother needs me," she said simply. "I have to go." She moved back into the small apartment in the Bronx. She became her mother's caretaker, her nurse, her everything. She woke up multiple times during the night to give Maria her medicine. She helped her mother to the bathroom. She cooked meals that Maria could barely eat. She held her mother's hand during the bad days, which became more and more frequent. The medical bills began to pile up. Insurance covered some costs, but not all. There were medicines that insurance did not pay for. There were treatments that required extra money. There were doctors who charged fees just to walk through the door. Elena watched their small savings disappear like water down a drain. She needed to find work. But what job could she do while taking care of her mother? She needed something with flexible hours, something that would let her be home when Maria needed her. She found work at a small restaurant near their apartment. The pay was low, but the manager was understanding. He let Elena change her schedule when her mother had doctor appointments. The months passed slowly, each one harder than the last. Elena watched her mother grow thinner and weaker. The woman who had once carried heavy cleaning supplies up flights of stairs now struggled to lift a cup of water. The woman who had never complained about anything now cried out in pain when she thought Elena was not listening. Elena sold the piano. She needed money for medicine, and there was no time to play anymore. When the men came to take it away, she stood in the corner of the apartment and watched. She did not cry. She had no tears left. Mr. Kowalski passed away that winter. Elena went to his funeral wearing the silver bracelet he had given her. There were not many people there, just a few neighbors and some old friends. Elena played nothing at the service. She had no piano, and even if she did, she was not sure her fingers remembered how to make music. Maria died on a Tuesday afternoon in March, 18 months after her diagnosis. Elena was holding her hand when it happened. One moment her mother was there, breathing softly, her eyes closed. The next moment she was gone, slipping away like a whisper. Elena sat with her mother's body for a long time. She did not know what to do. She did not know who to call. She just sat there holding a hand that was growing cold, feeling more alone than she had ever felt in her life. The funeral was small and simple. Elena could not afford anything fancy. She used the last of her money to buy a nice coffin and a small plot in a cemetery near their old church. A few neighbors came, a few people from Maria's old jobs. They all said how sorry they were, how Maria had been such a good woman, such a hard worker. After everyone left, Elena stood at the grave by herself. The sky was gray and heavy with clouds that threatened rain. She looked at the simple headstone with her mother's name and dates. "I am sorry, Mama," she whispered. "I am sorry I could not save you. I am sorry I gave up my music. I am sorry I could not make you proud." But there was no answer. There was only silence and the cold wind and the empty feeling in Elena's chest where her heart used to be. She was 20 years old and completely alone in the world. She had no money, no job, no education, no future. The dreams she once had seemed like stories about someone else, someone who lived in a different world. Elena went back to the empty apartment that night. She sat in the room where the piano used to be, staring at the blank wall. She stayed there for hours, not moving, not eating, not sleeping. She was lost, and she did not know how to find her way back. In the months that followed, Elena survived. That was the only word for it. She did not live. She survived. She found work where she could. She paid her bills when she could. She ate when she remembered to, but there was no joy in her life, no music, no hope. The girl who had once played Chopin at Lincoln Center was gone. In her place was a woman who had learned that dreams were dangerous things, beautiful lies that the world used to break your heart. Elena promised herself that she would never dream again. It was safer that way. It hurt less that way. She would keep her head down, do her work, and ask for nothing more than survival. She had no idea that life had other plans for her. 12 years had passed since Elena buried her mother. 12 years of working, surviving, and trying to forget who she used to be. She was now 32 years old, and her life had settled into a routine that never changed. She had worked at the Grandview Hotel for 3 years now. Before that, she had worked at restaurants, coffee shops, and catering companies. She had learned how to serve wealthy people, how to smile when they were rude, how to pretend that their cruel words did not hurt. She had become very good at being invisible on a crisp October morning. Elena arrived at work to find the entire events staff gathered in the main conference room. Mr. Patterson stood at the front, looking even more serious than usual. Next to him was a woman Elena had never seen before, tall and thin with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. "Listen carefully," Mr. Patterson said. "This is Mrs. Victoria Ashford. She is the head event coordinator for the Hartwell Foundation. As you all know, the Hartwell Foundation's 50th anniversary gala is in 3 weeks. This is the most important event our hotel has ever hosted. Everything must be perfect. Do you understand?" Perfect. Elena understood. The Hartwell family was one of the richest and most powerful families in America. They had made their money in banking over 100 years ago and had only grown richer since then. The foundation they created gave millions of dollars to charity every year. Their annual gala was famous for being the most exclusive social event of the season. Getting an invitation to the Hartwell Gala was nearly impossible. The guest list included billionaires, celebrities, politicians, and members of royal families from around the world. When the newspapers and television shows talked about it for weeks before and after, what people wore, what they ate, who they talked to, everything was reported and discussed. Mrs. Ashford spoke next. Her voice was cold and precise, like a knife cutting through silk. "The Hartwell family expects excellence. Mrs. Constance Hartwell herself will be attending this year. She is 93 years old, and this gala is very special to her. It was her late husband Robert Hartwell who started the foundation 50 years ago. This anniversary celebration will honor his memory." Elena listened carefully. She had heard of Constance Hartwell. Everyone had. The old woman was a legend in the city, a queen of high society who had been hosting parties and running charities since before Elena's mother was born. She was known for her sharp tongue, her high standards, and her deep love for her late husband, who had died 20 years ago. The highlight of the evening, Mrs. Ashford continued, will be a piano performance. Mrs. Hartwell has specifically requested this. Her husband was an amateur pianist who loved music more than anything. A performance will honor his memory and bring the evening to an emotional close. Alina felt something stir inside her at the mention of piano. She pushed it down quickly, as she always did. That part of her life was over. She was just a waitress now. For the next 3 weeks, the Grandview Hotel became a place of controlled chaos. Decorators came and went, carrying flowers and fabric and countless other things. Chefs worked day and night planning the menu. Security experts walked through the building, checking every entrance and exit. The hotel's finest china and crystal were brought out of storage and cleaned until they sparkled. Alina worked longer hours than ever before. She helped set up tables, polish silverware, and practiced the timing of the food service. Mr. Patterson was constantly watching, constantly criticizing, constantly reminding everyone that failure was not an option. The Hartwell family has been using this hotel for 40 years, he said. If we disappoint them, we will never host another event in this city again. Do you understand what is at stake? Alina understood, but she also did not really care. To her, this was just another job, another night of carrying trays and pouring drinks for people who would never see her. The size of the event did not matter. Her invisibility would be the same. A week before the gala, Alina learned who would be performing the piano piece. His name was Marcus Chen, and he was one of the most famous pianists in the world. He had performed with orchestras in Vienna, London, Paris, and Tokyo. He had won every major award in classical music. His recordings sold millions of copies worldwide. Alina had heard of him, of course. Back when she was at Juilliard, back when she still dreamed of a future in music, Marcus Chen had been one of her heroes. She had listened to his recordings over and over, marveling at his technique and emotional depth. She had imagined that one day she might share a stage with him. Now she would serve him champagne while he performed. The irony was not lost on her, but she felt nothing. She had learned long ago not to feel things that would only cause pain. The day of the gala arrived with the energy of a storm about to break. Alina woke up before dawn and took extra care getting ready. She pressed her uniform until there was not a single wrinkle. She tied her hair back so tightly that it pulled at her scalp. She checked her reflection in the mirror and saw what she always saw, a woman who had learned to disappear. She arrived at the hotel for hours before the event was scheduled to begin. The ballroom was already transformed into something magical. Thousands of white flowers covered every surface. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls. The tables were set with gold-rimmed plates and glasses that cost more than Elena's monthly rent. At the front of the room, on a raised stage, sat the most beautiful piano Elena had ever seen. It was a Steinway grand, black and shining, its lid raised to reveal the golden strings inside. Elena stopped and stared at it for a long moment. She could almost hear the music could almost feel the keys beneath her fingers. Vasquez, Mr. Patterson's sharp voice broke through her thoughts. Stop daydreaming and get to work. The guests arrive in 3 hours. Alina turned away from the piano and went to her station. She had work to do. She had champagne to pour and trays to carry and wealthy people to serve. She was a waitress, nothing more. But as she worked, she found her eyes returning to the piano again and again. It sat there on the stage, beautiful and silent, waiting for someone to bring it to life. Alina wondered what it would feel like to touch those keys. She wondered if her fingers still remembered the music they used to make. She wondered if the girl she used to be, the girl with dreams as big as the sky, was still alive somewhere inside her. Then she shook her head and looked away. That girl was dead. She had died with her mother, in that small apartment in the Bronx, surrounded by medical bills and broken dreams. Tonight, Alina would be invisible. Tonight, she would serve champagne to billionaires and watch Marcus Chen play the piano that she would never touch. Tonight, she would be exactly what the world expected her to be. Nothing more, nothing less. The guests would begin arriving soon, and the Grandview Hotel's most important event was about to begin. The guests began arriving at 7 o'clock, and Alina watched as the most powerful people in the world walked through the doors of the Grandview Hotel. She stood at her station near the entrance of the ballroom, holding a silver tray of champagne glasses, ready to serve anyone who wanted a drink. The women wore dresses that looked like they were made from dreams. Silk and satin and velvet in every color imaginable flowed around them as they walked. Diamonds sparkled at their necks and wrists and ears. Their hair was styled perfectly, and their makeup was flawless. They laughed and smiled and greeted each other with kisses on both cheeks. The men wore tuxedos that fit them like second skins. Their shoes were polished to a mirror shine. Their watches cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. They shook hands firmly and spoke about business deals and stock markets and things that Alina did not understand and did not care to understand. Alina offered her tray to anyone who walked past her. Most people took a glass without looking at her. Some ignored her completely. A few nodded slightly, which was as close to a thank you as she ever received at exactly 8 o'clock. The room fell silent as Mrs. Constance Hartwell made her entrance. She was a tiny woman, bent with age, her white hair arranged in an elegant style that must have taken hours to create. She wore a simple black dress, but the pearls around her neck were worth more than most houses. She walked slowly, supported by a young man who was probably her grandson, and everyone in the room stood up to greet her. Alina watched as the old woman made her way to the head table. Despite her age, there was something powerful about Constance Hartwell. Her eyes were sharp and clear, taking in everything around her. When she smiled at someone, they seemed to glow with pride. When she frowned, they seemed to shrink with fear. This was a woman who had lived a remarkable life. She had raised 5 children, built countless charities, and spent 60 years married to the love of her life. Now she was here to honor his memory, to celebrate the foundation he had created and the good it had done in the world. The dinner service began, and Alina moved through the room like a shadow. She refilled water glasses, cleared empty plates, and brought fresh bread to tables that requested it. She was careful, efficient, and completely invisible. No one noticed her. No one saw her. She was just another part of the room, like the flowers or the chandeliers. The food was extraordinary. 7 courses of dishes that looked like art and tasted like heaven. Alina had tried some of the food earlier, during the staff meal, and even the small portions they were given were better than anything she usually ate. The guests seemed to enjoy everything, though some complained about tiny details that no one else would notice. This champagne is not cold enough. The steak is slightly overcooked. Why is there parsley on my plate? I hate parsley. Alina handled each complaint with patience and a smile. She had learned long ago that wealthy people often complained, not because anything was actually wrong, but because complaining made them feel important. It reminded everyone around them that they had the power to demand perfection at 9:30. Alina noticed something strange happening near the backstage area. People were moving quickly, talking in low, urgent voices. She saw Mrs. Ashford, the event coordinator, with her phone pressed to her ear, her face pale and worried. Alina moved closer, pretending to check on a nearby table. She heard fragments of conversation. Collapsed in his hotel room. Ambulance on the way. What are we going to do? Something was wrong. Alina could feel the tension spreading through the staff like a disease. Other waiters and waitresses were whispering to each other, their faces confused and concerned. She found her friend Rosa, another waitress, near the kitchen entrance. Rosa was a kind woman in her 40s who had worked at the Grandview for 15 years. What is happening? Alina whispered. Rosa's eyes were wide. Marcus Chen, the pianist. He had a heart attack in his hotel room. They took him to the hospital. Alina felt her stomach drop. Marcus Chen was supposed to perform in less than an hour. He was supposed to play the piano piece that Mrs. Hartwell had specifically requested. Without him, the emotional highlight of the entire evening would be ruined. She watched as Mrs. Ashford spoke urgently with Mr. Patterson. The coordinator's hands were shaking. Mr. Patterson looked like he might be sick. They were both on their phones, calling number after number, trying to find someone, anyone, who could save the evening. But it was Saturday night. Every professional pianist in the city was either performing somewhere else or unavailable. One after another, Mrs. Ashford's calls went to voicemail or ended with apologies. There was no one, no backup plan, no solution. Alina stood frozen near her station, watching the disaster unfold. She thought about the beautiful Steinway on the stage, sitting there silent and waiting. She thought about Constance Hartwell, the 93-year-old woman who had come here to honor her husband's memory with music. She thought about how disappointed the old woman would be when she learned there would be no performance. And then, without understanding why, Alina thought about herself, about the girl she used to be, about the music that had once lived inside her fingers, waiting to pour out, about the dreams she had buried with her mother in that cemetery in the Bronx. She had not touched a piano in 12 years, 12 years of silence, 12 years of pretending that music did not exist, that it did not matter, that she was no one special. But standing there, watching Mrs. Ashford's face crumble with despair, something stirred inside Alina. Something that had been sleeping for a very long time began to wake up. She thought about her mother, about the sacrifices Maria had made so that Alina could learn to play, about the old piano in their apartment that her mother had somehow managed to bring home, about Mr. Kowalski and his gentle lessons and the silver bracelet that Alina still wore every day, hidden beneath her uniform sleeve. She thought about the competition at Lincoln Center, where she had played Chopin for hundreds of people. She thought about the professors at Juilliard who had called her once in a generation. She thought about all the music that was still locked inside her, waiting to be free. Before she could stop herself, before she could think about what she was doing, Alina walked toward Mrs. Ashford. Her legs felt weak. Her heart was beating so fast she thought it might explode, but she kept walking. "Excuse me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Ashford did not hear her. The woman was still on her phone, talking to someone who clearly could not help. Alina spoke louder. "Excuse me." Mrs. Ashford looked up, annoyed. Her eyes passed over Alina's uniform, dismissing her immediately. "What is it?" "I am very busy." Alina took a deep breath. The words came out before she could stop them. "I can play." Mrs. Ashford stared at her. Mr. Patterson stared at her. Everyone nearby turned to look at the waitress who had just said the most ridiculous thing anyone had ever heard. "You can what?" Mrs. Ashford asked, her voice dripping with disbelief. Alina stood up straighter. She thought about her mother. She thought about Mr. Kowalski. She thought about the little girl who had fallen in love with a broken piano on a sidewalk in the Bronx. "I can play the piano," she said. "I was trained at Juilliard. I can play whatever you need me to play, if you will let me." The room was silent. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Alina did not know if they would believe her. She did not know if she could actually do what she was offering to do. She only knew that she had to try. For the first time in 12 years, Alina Vasquez was not invisible anymore. The silence that followed Elena's words was heavy and uncomfortable. Mrs. Ashford looked at her like she had lost her mind. Mr. Patterson's face turned red with anger and embarrassment. The other staff members nearby stood frozen, their eyes wide with shock. "I am sorry," Mrs. Ashford said slowly, as if speaking to a child who did not understand simple things. "Did you just say that you can play the piano?" Alina nodded. Her hands were trembling at her sides, but she forced herself to stand tall. "Yes, I studied at Juilliard. I was trained in classical piano. I can play Chopin, Debussy, Beethoven, whatever you need." Mrs. Ashford let out a short, harsh laugh. "You studied at Juilliard?" She looked Alina up and down, taking in the simple waitress uniform, the practical shoes, the tired eyes, "and now you work as a waitress at a hotel." "It is a long story," Alina said quietly, "but I am telling you the truth. I can play." Mr. Patterson stepped forward, his face twisted with fury. "Vasquez, have you lost your mind? Go back to your station immediately." "I apologize, Mrs. Ashford. I do not know what has gotten into her. She will be dealt with appropriately." But Mrs. Ashford held up her hand. She was looking at Alina with a strange expression, somewhere between curiosity and desperation. The event coordinator was a practical woman. She had spent 30 years planning parties for the richest people in the world. She knew when a situation was hopeless, and she knew when to take a chance. "Wait," she said to Mr. Patterson. Then she turned back to Alina. "You really studied at Juilliard? Classical piano?" "Yes. I was there for 3 semesters before I had to leave. Family emergency." Alina did not want to explain more. The memories were too painful. "But I was good. I was very good. My professors said I had real talent." Mrs. Ashford looked at her phone. She had called every pianist she knew. No one was available. Marcus Chen was in an ambulance on his way to the hospital. In 45 minutes, Constance Hartwell expected to hear a beautiful piano performance in honor of her late husband. There were no other options. "Can you prove it?" Mrs. Ashford asked. "Can you show me right now that you can actually play?" Alina felt her heart beating in her throat. She had not touched a piano in 12 years. 12 years of silence. 12 years of her fingers doing nothing more musical than carrying trays and folding napkins. What if she could not play anymore? What if she sat down at that beautiful Steinway and her hands refused to remember? But she had already come this far. She could not turn back now. "Yes," she said. "Take me to a piano. I will show you." Mrs. Ashford made a quick decision. "Follow me. There is a piano in one of the private rooms backstage. We use it for rehearsals." She turned to Mr. Patterson. "Keep the event running smoothly. Do not let anyone know something is wrong. I will handle this." Mr. Patterson looked like he wanted to argue, but he knew better than to challenge Mrs. Ashford during a crisis. He nodded stiffly and walked away, shooting Alina a look that promised serious consequences later. Alina followed Mrs. Ashford through a door behind the stage, down a narrow hallway, and into a small room. There, in the corner, was an upright piano. It was not as beautiful as the Steinway in the ballroom, but it was a piano, a real piano with real keys waiting to be touched. Alina stood in front of it, her legs suddenly weak. This was the moment of truth. This was where she would discover if the music was still inside her or if it had died along with her dreams. "Well," Mrs. Ashford said impatiently, "play something." Alina sat down on the bench. The wood was cold and hard beneath her. She placed her hands on the keys, feeling the smooth ivory under her fingertips. It was a feeling she had almost forgotten, and yet it was as familiar as her own heartbeat. She closed her eyes. She thought about her mother. She thought about Mr. Kowalski. She thought about the little apartment in the Bronx, where she had practiced for hours every day, filling the small rooms with music that made her mother smile. Then she began to play. She chose the opening of Chopin's Ballade No. 1, a piece she had performed many times at Juilliard. The first notes came out hesitant, uncertain. Her fingers felt stiff and clumsy after so many years of neglect. She made a mistake in the third measure, hitting a wrong key that echoed in the small room like an accusation. But she did not stop. She kept playing, pushing through the fear and the doubt. And slowly, like a frozen river beginning to thaw, the music began to flow. Her fingers started to remember. The muscle memory was still there, buried deep inside her hands, waiting to be awakened. The notes came faster, more confident. The melody rose and fell like waves on the ocean. The harmonies built and released, creating emotions that words could never express. Alina played for 3 minutes, maybe 4. She did not play perfectly. There were mistakes, moments where her technique faltered and her timing slipped. 12 years of silence had taken their toll. But beneath the imperfections, there was something undeniable. There was talent. There was feeling. There was music that came from somewhere deep inside her soul. But when she finally stopped, her hands were shaking and there were tears on her cheeks. She had not even realized she was crying. She turned around slowly, afraid to see Mrs. Ashford's reaction. The event coordinator was standing completely still. Her face had changed. The impatience and skepticism were gone, replaced by something that looked almost like wonder. "My God," Mrs. Ashford whispered. "You really can play." Alina wiped her eyes quickly, embarrassed by her tears. "I told you I could." But that was— Mrs. Ashford struggled to find the right words. "That was beautiful. It was not perfect, but it was beautiful. How is this possible? How did someone with your talent end up as a waitress?" Alina looked down at her hands, the hands that had once promised so much, the hands that had carried nothing but trays and glasses for so many years. "Life happened," she said simply. "Sometimes dreams do not survive life." Mrs. Ashford was silent for a long moment. Then she made a decision. "We have 40 minutes until the performance. Can you be ready?" Alina felt a wave of fear wash over her. Playing alone in a small room was one thing. Playing in front of 400 of the richest and most important people in the world was something else entirely. What if she failed? What if she embarrassed herself in the hotel and Mrs. Hartwell? What if she proved that she was nothing but a waitress after all? But then she thought about the alternative. No performance. A disappointed old woman whose husband's memory would not be honored. An evening ruined because there was no music. "Yes," Alina said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I can be ready." Mrs. Ashford nodded briskly. "Good. We need to prepare. First, we need to do something about your appearance. You cannot go on stage dressed as a waitress." Alina looked down at her black pants and white shirt and black vest. She had not thought about that. "I do not have anything else to wear. All my clothes are at home." Mrs. Ashford was already on her phone. "I know someone. Wait here. Practice whatever you are going to play. I will be back in 15 minutes. She hurried out of the room, leaving Alina alone with the piano. Alina turned back to the keys, her mind racing. What would she play? What pieces did she remember well enough to perform in front of an audience? She began to go through her memories, searching for music that was still alive inside her. Chopin, Debussy, Beethoven. Songs her mother had loved. Songs that had meaning beyond just notes on a page. Alina took a deep breath and began to practice. She had 40 minutes to prepare for the most important performance of her life. For the first time in 12 years, Alina Vasquez was about to play the piano for an audience, and everything was about to change. The 30 minutes that followed were the most intense of Alina's life. She sat at the old upright piano in the backstage room, her fingers moving over the keys again and again, trying to remember pieces she had not played in over a decade. Some things came back easily. Her hands remembered Debussy's Clair de Lune almost perfectly, the gentle notes flowing like moonlight on water. The Chopin nocturnes were still there too, living somewhere in her muscle memory, waiting to be called back to life. But other pieces were gone, lost to the years of silence. She would start to play something and then stop, unable to remember what came next. Alina focused on what she could do, not what she could not. She chose 3 pieces for her performance. First, Clair de Lune by Debussy, because it was beautiful and gentle, and would set a peaceful mood. Second, a Chopin nocturne because Chopin had always been her favorite composer and his music spoke directly to the heart. Third, and most importantly, an arrangement of Somewhere Over the Rainbow. This last choice was personal. Her mother had loved that song. When Alina was a little girl, Maria would sing it to her at night, her voice soft and slightly off. After Alina learned to play piano, she had created her own arrangement of the melody, weaving it with classical harmonies that made it sound both familiar and new. She had played it at her mother's funeral, the last time she had ever touched a piano. Now she would play it again, for a room full of strangers, in honor of someone else's lost love. A knock on the door interrupted her practice. Mrs. Ashford walked in, followed by a young woman carrying a garment bag and a small case of makeup supplies. "This is Isabella," Mrs. Ashford said quickly. "She works with one of the fashion companies sponsoring tonight's event. She is going to help you look presentable." Alina stood up, uncertain. "I do not think there is time for— There's always time to look professional." Mrs. Ashford cut her off. "You have 15 minutes. Make them count." Isabella took over with the efficiency of someone who transformed people for a living. She unzipped the garment bag to reveal a simple black dress, elegant and understated. It was not fancy like the gowns the guests were wearing, but it was sophisticated and appropriate for a performer. "Take off your uniform and put this on," Isabella instructed. "It should fit. I guessed your size based on what Mrs. Ashford told me." Alina changed quickly, her fingers fumbling with buttons and zippers. The dress fit almost perfectly, a little loose in some places, but nothing that would be noticeable from the audience. It was the nicest thing she had worn in years. Isabella worked on Alina's hair next, pulling it out of the tight bun and letting it fall around her shoulders in soft waves. Then came makeup, applied with quick, practiced strokes. Not too much, just enough to highlight her eyes and add color to her cheeks. When Isabella finished, he stepped back and smiled. "Look at yourself." Alina turned to face a small mirror on the wall. The woman looking back at her was someone she barely recognized. She looked elegant, professional, almost beautiful. She looked like someone who belonged on a stage. "The dress is yours to keep," Isabella said kindly. "Consider it a gift. Now go out there and show them what you can do." Mrs. Ashford checked her watch. 5 minutes. The guests have finished dinner. Mrs. Hartwell is expecting the performance to begin shortly. Are you ready? Alina was not ready. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was pounding so loud she could hear it in her ears. Her mind was filled with doubts and fears and memories of everything that had gone wrong in her life. She wanted to run away, to hide, to go back to being invisible. But she thought about her mother again. She thought about all the sacrifices Maria had made so that Alina could have this gift. She thought about how disappointed a mother would be if she gave up now, if she let fear win. "I am ready," Alina said. Mrs. Ashford led her through the backstage hallways toward the ballroom. With each step, Alina could hear the sound of the party growing louder, the clinking of glasses, the murmur of conversation, the occasional burst of laughter. 400 of the richest people in the world were waiting, and they had no idea what was about to happen. They stopped just behind the stage curtain. Alina could see the Steinway from here, its black surface gleaming under the lights. It was the most beautiful piano she had ever seen, and in a few moments, she would be sitting in front of it. "I need to announce you," Mrs. Ashford said. "What is your name again?" Elena Vasquez. Mrs. Ashford nodded and walked out onto the stage. Alina watched through a gap in the curtain as the event coordinator approached the microphone. The room gradually fell silent as people noticed someone was about to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mrs. Ashford began, her voice calm and controlled, betraying none of the panic she had felt earlier. "As many of you know, tonight's musical performance was to be given by the renowned pianist Marcus Chen. Unfortunately, Mr. Chen has experienced a medical emergency and is unable to perform this evening. We send him our best wishes for a quick recovery." A murmur of surprise and disappointment rippled through the crowd. Alina saw guests exchanging concerned glances. She saw Constance Hartwell at the head table, her old face suddenly sad. However, Mrs. Ashford continued, "The evening will not be without music. In a remarkable turn of events, we have discovered a talented pianist among our own staff tonight. Please join me in welcoming Elena Vasquez to the stage." There was a moment of confused silence. Among the staff, what did that mean? The guests looked at each other with puzzled expressions. Alina took a deep breath. This was it. There was no turning back now. She stepped out from behind the curtain and walked toward the piano. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her, curious and skeptical. She heard whispers spreading through the crowd like fire. "Who is she?" "She works here. A waitress. Playing piano at the Hartwell Gala. This must be some kind of joke." Alina kept her eyes forward, focused on the piano. She did not look at the faces staring at her. She did not listen to the whispers. She just walked, one step at a time, until she reached the bench. She sat down slowly. The piano was even more magnificent up close. The keys were perfect, white and black, waiting for her touch. She placed her fingers on them gently, feeling their cool smoothness. The room was silent now. Everyone was watching, waiting to see what would happen. Some were curious, some were amused, some were already preparing to be disappointed. Alina closed her eyes. She thought about her mother sitting beside her on the old piano bench in the Bronx. She thought about Mr. Kowalski's patient voice guiding her through difficult passages. She thought about the silver bracelet on her wrist, hidden beneath the sleeve of her borrowed dress. "This is for you, Mama," she whispered, so quietly that no one could hear. Then she began to play. The first notes of Clair de Lune floated into the air like drops of silver rain. They were soft and gentle and impossibly beautiful. They hung in the silence of the ballroom like stars appearing one by one in a night sky. Alina played, and the world around her disappeared. There was no audience. There were no wealthy guests in expensive clothes. There was no hotel, no ballroom, no stage. There was only the music and the piano and the feelings that poured from her heart, through her fingers into the keys. She played, and for the first time in 12 years, she felt truly alive. The music filled the grand ballroom like water filling an empty vessel. It reached into every corner, touched every person, and created a silence so complete that even breathing seemed too loud. Alina played Clair de Lune with her eyes closed, letting her fingers remember the path they had traveled so many times before. The melody rose and fell like gentle waves, painting pictures of moonlight on still water, of quiet nights and peaceful dreams. It was not perfect. Her technique had suffered from 12 years of neglect. Some transitions were not as smooth as they should have been. Some notes were slightly hesitant. But none of that mattered. What came through the imperfections was something far more powerful than technical perfection. It was emotion, raw and honest. It was the sound of someone who had suffered and survived, who had lost everything and was slowly finding it again. It was music that told a story without words. The guests sat frozen in their seats. The whispers and doubts from moments before were completely forgotten. Men and women who spent their days making million-dollar deals and running massive companies now sat like children at a bedtime story. Completely captivated by what they were hearing, Elena finished Clair de Lune and moved seamlessly into Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. This piece was more complex, more demanding. It required speed and precision that Elena was not sure she still had. But she pushed forward anyway, letting the music carry her. Her fingers danced across the keys, finding notes she thought she had forgotten. The Nocturne built slowly, layer upon layer of harmony and melody weaving together into something beautiful and sad at the same time. It spoke of longing and loss, of love that transcends death, of memories that never fade. Somewhere in the middle of the piece, Elena felt tears on her cheeks again. She was crying for her mother, for Mr. Kowalski, for the girl she used to be. She was crying for all the years she had spent in silence, hiding from her gift, pretending she was nobody special. She was crying because the music was too beautiful to keep inside. She did not stop playing. She let the tears fall and kept her fingers moving. The music was more important than her tears. In the audience, something remarkable was happening. The people who had come to this gala expecting a world-famous pianist were being moved by something far more powerful than fame. They were witnessing transformation. They were seeing a woman reclaim something she had lost. Right there in front of them. Mrs. Constance Hartwell sat at the head table with tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. She had heard the greatest pianists in the world perform on stages from New York to Vienna. She had hosted private concerts with musicians whose names were known everywhere. But she had never heard anything quite like this. This waitress, this unknown woman in a simple black dress, was playing with a depth of feeling that took Constance's breath away. Each note seemed to carry weight, seemed to mean something. It was not just music, it was a story, a confession, a prayer. Constance thought about her husband Robert, who had died 20 years ago. Robert had loved music more than almost anything. He had played the piano himself, not professionally but with great passion. He used to say that music was the language of the soul, the only way to express things that words could never capture. If Robert were here now, Constance knew exactly what he would say. He would say that this woman had something special. He would say that this was what music was supposed to be, not a performance but a communication from one heart to another. Elena finished the Nocturne and paused for just a moment. Her hands were tired. Her eyes were wet. Her heart was beating so fast she thought it might burst. But she was not done yet. She had one more piece to play. She thought about her mother's voice, soft and warm in the darkness of their small apartment. She thought about the words of that song, words about troubles melting like lemon drops and skies being blue. She thought about wishes and dreams and bluebirds flying over the rainbow. Then she began to play Somewhere Over the Rainbow. She had arranged this piece herself, years ago, taking the simple melody and transforming it into something classical and complex. The famous tune was there, recognizable and beautiful, but it was woven through with harmonies and variations that made it feel deeper, richer, more meaningful. The song started quietly, almost like a lullaby. The notes were gentle and tender, full of hope and longing. Elena played it the way her mother used to sing it, with love and faith and the belief that dreams really could come true. Then the music began to build. The melody became stronger, more powerful. The harmonies grew more complex. The tempo increased. It was as if the song was transforming from a wish into a declaration, from a dream into a reality. Elena put everything she had into this final piece. All her pain, all her loss, all her years of silence and suffering, but also all her hope, all her strength, all the love her mother had given her. She played for the woman who had believed in her when no one else did. She played for the teacher who had seen her potential and nurtured it. She played for the little girl who had fallen in love with a broken piano on a sidewalk in the Bronx. The music reached its climax, a magnificent cascade of notes that seemed to fill the entire world. Then it began to soften, returning to the gentle melody from the beginning, quieter and quieter, until the final notes faded away like the last. Light of sunset. Silence. Complete and total silence. Elena sat at the piano, her hands resting on the keys, her heart pounding, her body trembling. She was afraid to open her eyes. She was afraid to see disappointment or boredom or indifference on the faces of the audience. She was afraid that the magic she had felt was only in her imagination. Then she heard it, a single pair of hands clapping. She opened her eyes and looked toward the sound. It was Constance Hartwell. The 93-year-old woman was standing at her table, her frail hands coming together again and again in applause. Her face was wet with tears, but she was smiling. Then another person stood, and another, and another. The applause spread through the room like wildfire. Within moments, all 400 guests were on their feet, clapping and cheering and wiping their eyes. Elena stared at them in disbelief. These were the richest, most powerful people in the world. They had heard the greatest musicians alive, and they were standing and applauding for her, a waitress who served them champagne just hours ago. The applause continued for what felt like forever. Elena stood up slowly from the piano bench, her legs unsteady. She did not know what to do. She had never expected this. She had only wanted to help, to fill the silence left by Marcus Chin's absence. She looked at Mrs. Ashford, who was standing at the side of the stage. The event coordinator was crying and smiling at the same time, shaking her head in amazement. Elena looked at Mr. Patterson, who was standing near the kitchen entrance. Even he looked stunned, his usual frown replaced by an expression of pure shock. Then Alina looked at Constance Hartwell. The old woman was still standing, still clapping, her eyes fixed on Alina with an intensity that was almost frightening. The applause finally began to fade. People sat back down, still buzzing with excitement and emotion, but Constance remained standing. She raised one thin hand and beckoned toward Alina. "Come here, child," she said, her voice surprisingly strong for someone her age. "Come here. I want to meet you." Alina walked toward the head table on legs that felt like they were made of water. The other guests watched in fascination as the waitress approached the queen of high society. When Alina reached the table, Constance took her hands. The old woman's grip was warm and firm. "What is your name?" Constance asked. "Elena Vasquez." Constance studied her face for a long moment. "You have a gift." "Elena Vasquez. A rare and precious gift. Where did you learn to play like that?" Alina swallowed hard. "I studied at Juilliard. A long time ago, before life got in the way." Constance nodded slowly, as if she understood exactly what Alina meant. "My husband would have loved you," she said softly. "He always believed that talent should never be wasted, that music was too important to be lost." Alina did not know what to say. Her throat was tight with emotion. All she could do was stand there, holding the hands of this remarkable old woman, feeling like she was in a dream. "We need to talk," Constance said. "After the party, you and I need to have a long conversation about your future." Alina nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Her future. She had not thought about having a future in so long. She had been so busy surviving that she had forgotten what it meant to live. Constance smiled and patted her hands. "Go now. Enjoy the applause. You earned it." Alina walked back toward the stage, where Mrs. Ashford was waiting. Around her, the party was starting up again, guests chatting excitedly about what they had just witnessed, but Alina barely noticed. She was too busy thinking about the word Constance had used. Future. For the first time in 12 years, Elena Vasquez had a future. The rest of the gala passed in a blur for Alina. She stood backstage with Mrs. Ashford, watching the party continue through a gap in the curtain. Guests were dancing now, laughing and celebrating, but many of them kept glancing toward the stage where Alina had performed. She heard fragments of conversation whenever staff members passed by. "Did you see that? A waitress. I have been to concerts all over the world. That was something special. Where has she been hiding? Someone like that should not be serving champagne. I heard she went to Juilliard." Can you imagine? Alina did not know how to feel. Part of her was proud, happier than she had been in years, but another part was scared. She had opened a door that she had kept closed for a very long time, and she did not know what was on the other side. Mrs. Ashford stayed with her, handling phone calls and messages that kept coming in. Several guests wanted to meet Alina. A couple of them were music producers. One was a woman who ran a famous concert hall. Another was a journalist who wanted to write about what had happened. "This is incredible," Mrs. Ashford said, looking at her phone with wide eyes. "You have no idea what is happening right now. People are posting about you on social media. Someone recorded your performance on their phone. It already has thousands of views." Alina did not really understand social media. She had a phone, but she rarely used it for anything besides calls and simple messages. The idea that thousands of strangers were watching her play piano was strange and overwhelming. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Mrs. Ashford smiled. "Now we wait for Mrs. Hartwell. She asked to speak with you after the party ends. Whatever she has to say, I suggest you listen very carefully. Constance Hartwell does not take interest in many people. When she does, their lives tend to change." The party ended at midnight. Guests began to leave, climbing into expensive cars and limousines that waited outside the hotel. Many of them asked about Alina on their way out. Where was she? Could they meet her? Did she have a business card? Alina stayed backstage, hidden from view. She was not ready to face the crowd of curious rich people. She was still wearing the black dress Isabella had given her, still wearing the makeup that made her look like someone else. She felt like an actress playing a role, waiting for the curtain to fall so she could become herself again. At midnight, a young man in a suit appeared backstage. He was tall and handsome, with the kind of confidence that came from growing up wealthy. "Miss Vasquez, I am Thomas Hartwell, Constance's grandson. My grandmother would like to see you now, if you would follow me." Alina followed Thomas through the hotel to a private room she had never seen before. It was small and elegant, with comfortable chairs and soft lighting. Constance Hartwell was sitting in one of the chairs, looking tired but happy. She was holding a cup of tea in her wrinkled hands. "Sit down, Alina," Constance said, pointing to a chair across from her. "Thomas, bring us some tea, and then leave us alone. I want to speak with this young woman privately." Thomas nodded and left the room. A few minutes later he returned with a tea tray, set it down, and disappeared again. Constance looked at Alina for a long moment without speaking. Her eyes were sharp and intelligent, taking in every detail. "Tell me your story," she finally said. "All of it. I want to understand how someone with your gift ended up carrying trays at a hotel." Alina hesitated. She had never told her story to anyone. It was too painful, too personal. But there was something about Constance that made her want to open up. Maybe it was the kindness in the old woman's eyes. Maybe it was the understanding that seemed to flow between them. Maybe Alina was just tired of carrying her secrets alone. She began to talk. She told Constance about the piano on the sidewalk and her mother's determination to give her lessons. She told her about Mr. Kowalski and his patient teaching. She told her about the competitions and the concert at Lincoln Center and the scholarship to Juilliard. Then she told her about the cancer, the diagnosis that changed everything, leaving school to take care of her mother, selling the piano to pay for medicine, watching her mother fade away day by day until there was nothing left. After she died, I had nothing, Alina said, her voice barely above a whisper. No money, no education, no family. I worked wherever I could, restaurants, coffee shops, catering companies. Eventually I ended up here, at the Grandview. It was just a job, a way to survive. I never expected anything more. Constance listened without interrupting. When Alina finished, the old woman was silent for a long time. Your mother sounds like a remarkable woman, Constance finally said. She believed in me more than anyone. And you believe you failed her by not becoming a pianist. Alina felt tears rising again. I was supposed to be somebody. She worked so hard so that I could have opportunities. And I threw it all away. Constance shook her head firmly. No, you did not throw anything away. You took care of your mother when she needed you. You sacrificed your dreams for love. There is nothing shameful about that. Your mother would be proud of what you did. I do not know, Alina said. Sometimes I think she would be disappointed. I lost my husband 20 years ago, Constance said quietly. Robert was the love of my life. When he died, I wanted to die too. I did not see the point of going on, but I had children and grandchildren who needed me, so I kept living, even when it hurt. She reached across and took Alina's hand. Grief makes us do strange things. It makes us hide from ourselves, from our gifts, from our future. But tonight, you stopped hiding. Tonight, you sat down at that piano and you showed the world who you really are. Alina did not know what to say. No one had spoken to her like this in years. No one had looked at her with such warmth and understanding. I want to help you, Constance continued. I want to give you the chance you deserve. Not because I feel sorry for you, but because I believe in you. Because I heard you play tonight, and I know that the world needs your music. Alina's heart was beating fast. Help me how? Constance smiled. I want to sponsor your return to music. I will pay for you to study again, to work with teachers who can help you regain your technique. I will give you a small salary so that you do not have to worry about working other jobs. And I will introduce you to people who can help you build a career as a performer. Alina stared at her in disbelief. Why? Why would you do this for me? You do not even know me. Because my husband would have wanted me to, Constance said simply. Robert spent his whole life helping talented people who did not have resources. He believed that art and music made the world better, and that everyone deserved a chance to share their gifts. When I heard you play tonight, I heard something that Robert would have recognized. Something rare, something worth saving. Alina was crying now, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. I do not know what to say. This is too much. I cannot accept this. You can, and you will, Constance said firmly. Consider it an investment. You will pay me back by sharing your music with the world, by making people feel what I felt tonight. That is all the thanks I need. Alina looked down at her hands, the hands that had almost forgotten how to make music. Could she really do this? Could she really start over, after so many years of silence? She thought about her mother. She thought about what Maria would say if she were here now. She knew the answer without even having to ask. Okay, Alina said quietly. I will try. Constance smiled and squeezed her hand. Good. Now dry your tears and drink your tea. We have a lot of planning to do. 6 months had passed since the night that changed everything. 6 months of hard work, early mornings, late nights, and more piano practice than Alina had done in her entire life. Constance Hartwell had kept every promise she made. She paid for Alina to study with Professor Michael Torres, one of the best piano teachers in the country. She rented a small but comfortable apartment for Alina near a music conservatory. She introduced Alina to concert promoters, recording executives, and other musicians who could help her build a career. The journey back to music was not easy. 12 years of silence had done real damage to Alina's technique. Her fingers were stiff and slow. Her muscle memory was full of gaps. Some pieces that she used to play perfectly were now almost impossible. But Alina worked harder than she had ever worked before. She practiced for 8 hours every day, sometimes more. She studied recordings of great pianists, analyzing every detail of their technique. She worked with Professor Torres 3 times a week, learning exercises and methods to rebuild what she had lost. Slowly, painfully, her skills began to return. Her fingers became faster and more precise. Her technique improved week by week. The music that had been trapped inside her for so long began to flow freely again. You are making remarkable progress, Professor Torres told her one afternoon. I have never seen someone recover so quickly from such a long break. You must have been truly exceptional when you were young. I had good teachers, Alina said, thinking of Mr. Kowalski, and a mother who believed in me. The video from the Hartwell Gala had gone viral on the internet. Millions of people had watched the Waitress sit down at the Steinway and create magic. News organizations ran stories about Elena's journey from Juilliard prodigy to hotel server to surprise performer. Her story touched something in people, reminded them that dreams do not have to die, that second chances are possible. Elena received hundreds of messages from strangers who had watched the video. Some were from people who had given up on their own dreams and were now thinking about trying again. Some were from students who were struggling with their own studies and found inspiration in her persistence. Some were simply thank you notes from people whose lives had been touched by her music. One message stood out from all the others. It was from a woman named Sarah Chen, the wife of Marcus Chen, the famous pianist, who had suffered a heart attack on the night of the gala. Marcus was recovering well, she wrote. He had watched Elena's performance from his hospital bed and had been deeply moved. My husband wants to meet you, Sarah wrote. He says anyone who can play like that deserves to be heard by the world. When he is fully recovered, he would like to help you in any way he can. Elena cried when she read that message. The man whose shoes she had tried to fill that night wanted to help her succeed. It felt like the universe was finally giving her back some of what it had taken away. On a warm spring evening, 6 months after the Hartwell Gala, Elena stood backstage at the Weil Recital Hall at Carnegie Hall. It was one of the smaller venues in the famous building, but it was still Carnegie Hall. It was still a stage that the greatest musicians in history had stood upon. Tonight was Elena's first official public recital since leaving Juilliard over a decade ago. She would play a full program of Chopin and Debussy, ending with her own arrangement of Somewhere Over the Rainbow. 200 people had bought tickets to hear her play. Some were music critics, some were talent scouts, some were just fans who had seen the viral video and wanted to experience her music in person. Constance Hartwell sat in the front row, wearing a simple but elegant dress and the same pearl necklace she had worn at the gala. She had been there for every step of Elena's journey, offering encouragement when Elena doubted herself, celebrating every small victory along the way. Are you nervous? Mrs. Ashford asked. She had come to taking time off from her busy schedule to support the woman whose talent had saved the Hartwell Gala. Very nervous, Elena admitted. What if I fail? What if I am not good enough? Mrs. Ashford smiled. You were good enough 6 months ago when you had not touched a piano in 12 years. You are much better now. Just play like you played that night. Play from your heart. Elena touched the silver bracelet on her wrist, the one Mr. Kowalski had given her so long ago. She had worn it every day since his funeral. It connected her to the people who had believed in her, who had helped her become who she was. Mama, she whispered softly, this is for you. Then she walked out onto the stage. The applause was warm and welcoming. Elena saw Constance smiling up at her from the front row. She saw Mrs. Ashford and several other guests from the gala. She saw Professor Torres, looking proud and a little nervous. She saw strangers who had come because her story had touched them. She sat down at the grand piano and placed her hands on the keys. The instrument was beautiful, perfectly tuned, waiting to bring music to life. Elena closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself, finding the quiet place inside her where the music lived. Then she began to play. The music filled the hall, like light filling a dark room. It was better than it had been at the gala, stronger and more confident. 6 months of hard work had sharpened her technique, but the emotion was still there, the raw honesty that had moved people so deeply that night. Elena played Chopin and Debussy, her fingers dancing across the keys with joy and precision. She played her own arrangement of Somewhere Over the Rainbow, tears streaming down her face as she thought of her mother, singing it in their little apartment in the Bronx when she finished. There was a moment of perfect silence. Then the audience rose to their feet, applauding and cheering. Some people were crying, some were laughing with joy. All of them were moved by what they had just experienced. Elena stood and bowed, her heart so full she thought it might burst. She looked at Constance Hartwell, who was clapping and crying at the same time. She looked up at the ceiling and imagined her mother was watching from somewhere beyond. Thank you, Mama, she whispered. Thank you for everything. After the concert, Elena greeted audience members in the lobby. People wanted to shake her hand, take pictures with her, tell her how much her music meant to them. One young woman, a music student who was struggling with doubt about her own abilities, held Elena's hand and said, You give me hope. Thank you for not giving up. Elena hugged her. Never give up, she said. Even when it seems impossible, the music is always inside you, waiting to come out. Later that night, Elena walked alone through the quiet streets of the city. If she thought about the incredible journey that had brought her here, she thought about the piano on the sidewalk and her mother's faith and Mr. Kowalski's gentle lessons. She thought about the dark years of grief and silence, the nights when she thought she would never feel joy again. And she thought about the moment at the Hartwell Gala when she had stepped forward and said, I can play. That one moment of courage had changed everything. It had opened a door that she thought was closed forever. Elena walked past the Grandview Hotel. The lights were on, and she could see people moving inside. Somewhere in there, waiters and waitresses were carrying trays and serving drinks to wealthy guests who would never notice them. She had been one of them not so long ago. She did not feel superior to them. She felt grateful. Grateful for the job that had kept her alive during her darkest years. Grateful for the strange twist of fate that had put her in the right place at the right time. grateful for every experience, good and bad, that had led her to this moment. Elena Vasquez was a pianist. She was someone who mattered, whose music touched people's hearts and made the world a little more beautiful. She was exactly who her mother had always believed she could be, and she was just getting started. She walked on through the night, humming Somewhere Over the Rainbow softly to herself, smiling at the stars that glittered above the city like promises waiting to be kept. The end.